What's going on, guys? I hope everybody's having a good Monday so far. If you've been following the series, you know that we're making a game like The Binding of Isaac. In the last couple of videos, we've been making some cool rooms like this spike room. One thing that we haven't got around to doing is the floor. So right now, the floor is just a plane. It doesn't have anything on it. And ideally, it would be tiled floor because it's a dungeon. And also, if you put tiles, it makes it easier to align things. So like when we put treasure chests and cubes and blocks and stuff like that, it'll be easier to put them on tiles because it will like add a grid system to the floor. So in this video, we're going to be making this floor. This is probably not going to be the final floor, but I'm going to show you how you can use geometry nodes to make a floor just using tiles, and then it will automatically randomize between the tiles. So here in Blender, you can see that we have this set up. And so this floor is randoming between these tiles on the left here. So if I take this tile, for example, and I duplicate it and I move it down here and I edit it and I just move some of these up, you can see that this is automatically included in the tiles over here. And if we click on this, there's a random seed option and you can drag the random seed so that you get a random floor. So if you're creating a bunch of rooms, you could create a bunch of random floors that are using the same tiles for all the rooms very quickly and very easily. So if you guys are enjoying the series so far, make sure you like the video and subscribe to my channel. And yeah. Okay, so here we are in a really simple setup version of this file, and this Blender file is available in the description of the video for free. You're welcome to download it and use it however you want to. So before we go through the complicated geometry nodes, which you don't actually need to do that. Like if you're following this and you're new to Blender and you have never used geometry nodes, you can just ignore that. If you download the file, all you have to do is edit this cube to be whatever you want it to be, and it will appear on the right. If you want to add another tile to your collection, you can press Shift D to duplicate it and just make another copy, and then you can edit each one, and away you go, right? There are some settings for the geometry nodes, though, that you do need to know about in order for you to actually effectively use it, right? So if you click on this, there's the floor size X and Y. This is the size of your floor, right? So the bigger you make this, the more spread out your tiles will be. And you could also do the y-axis, so you could make a rectangle floor or whatever you want to do. The floor vertices X and Y, this is the number of tiles. So right now you can see this is 8 by 8. If you wanted this to be like 16 by 8, you would have to increase the floor size to accommodate that if you want to. And yeah, so like if you doubled it to 16, then 6 is probably good. No, it's not. There's no gap at all. But anyway, you could just mess with these. So these are the size, and this is the number of tiles. So let me just put this back to 8. That's what we had initially. And this was 3, I think. Yeah, and then the random seed. So this only applies if you have different tiles, right? Like if your tiles are actually randomized. So let's go and edit a corner of this to be a little bit over. And you can see that we have random rotation turned on. So if you turn this on and off, this affects whether every single tile will have a random rotation on the Z axis. It's only on the Z axis. It's not on any of the other axes. And it's not like a random between 0 and 360. It's either 90, 180, I can't do math, 270 and 360. So like it's just, there's only 4 possible rotations. The random seed is what actually randomizes it. So like if you generate a floor and you don't like the way it looks, or maybe you've added a prop to one of these things, like if you go in here and you press like Shift A and you add like a plane and you move this up and scale it and rotate X or whatever, maybe this is near the edge of your tile and maybe you don't want this to go off the edge on any of the sides. So you could change the seed until you get a floor that you actually like, that maybe there's like a plant or something. Like I have plants in my version. You can see that there's like a plant here and a plant here. Well, if the plant is too close to the edge of the tile, it could go into the wall and maybe you don't want that. So there's a random seed so you can re-roll the ground. Like even if you have the tile set that you want, maybe the ground that gets generated the first time is not the one that you actually want. So let's press Control Z and actually get rid of this because that's obviously not the tile that we want. But yeah, so that's the options on the right there. And that's all the options. So if you don't want to learn about the geometry nodes, you can just download the file, edit the tiles however you want to. If you want to add another tile, you just press Shift D and then you could press Y and just move it on like away from where this one is. And then if you edit this one, every tile you add here will be part of the tile set. So you can see that now some of them are the normal one, which is this one, and some of them have this little angle that we've added to the tile. And if we duplicate this again, like this, and we take these sides, you can see that now there's 4 tiles in the tile set. So you can add as many tiles to the tile set that you want and just make them look however you want. Hopefully your artistic abilities are better than mine and you'll make some cool looking tiles. But that's pretty much it for that. All right, so now I'm going to go over the geometry nodes. This is not going to be an introduction video to geometry nodes. I will link a video. If you're new to this, you can go and follow the video I'm going to link. It's not going to be like, I'm not going to be going over everything in detail. There's already a lot of videos that already do that. I'm just going to show you how I set this up. So over here on the left, we have the group input. This is what gives us these options where we can edit the settings on the right. So to add more settings, it's just this group tab on the right here, and you can click the plus button. There's a lot of different variable types that you can add, like everything from like a string, which is like text, a Boolean, which is like true or false, materials, numbers, you name it, right? So you can pretty much add anything as a group input. So that's where you get these like variables that you can edit to actually edit the grid. The grid is basically, it's exactly what this is a node that literally just makes a grid. This is going into instance on points. So we can use this to actually put our instances, which is what this is, onto the points of our grid. This is this collection info. To get this into here, you just can drag an entire collection into the geometry nodes. And this allows you to do what we're doing here, where we're randoming between all of the objects that are in this collection. So when you're adding these cubes, you have to make sure they're in the floor tiles collection, because that's where we're getting these instances from. Yeah, so the domain size is the number of instances in this. So every time you add a cube to this, this will get bigger. So if we have 10 cubes here, the domain size will be 10. And we're going into a random value here between 0 and the domain size. So that way we can randomize, because the instance index is which object appears. So there's another collection info here. Let me just drag this up. And this is the actual where we're giving the instance to this. But this is a list of instances, right? Because like, if let's say you have 2 or 3 cubes here, it needs to know which one to pick. So we're checking pick instance, and we're randoming a number between 0 and the number of objects in this collection. So this allows us to pick a random tile and put it into a grid. Now we have a random value down here from 0 to 15. The reason this should really just be 0 to 5. This is just a number that we're going to multiply by 90 to give us a random rotation, because our rotations, we only want the tile to be directly in one direction. We don't want to like, you have to convert it to radians, because the rotate instances only accepts radians, and we're only doing the Z axis. So we take a random value between 0 and 15, which could technically be anything from 0 to a number above 5. We're multiplying it by 90 to get like a 90-degree angle. We're converting that number to radians. Then we're setting it to only affect the Z axis, because we don't want it to rotate. This is the X axis, and this is the Y axis. So we only want this to affect the Z axis. And then we're rotating the instances that are coming out of our randomization here. And we're putting these into a switch. Now the switch is what we're using if we don't, like sometimes we don't want them to be random, right? So like we have a Boolean value controlling this. A switch is just a true or false. So if this is on, it will if it is on, it will rotate them to random rotation. If it's off, it won't rotate them to a random rotation. So you could turn this on or off. So let me just show you. So if let's say you edit one of these corners and it's like this, well, you can see that all of them are completely random in the rotation. But if we turn this off, this will make it so that all of them are not randomly rotated. So this would be good if you're using like bricks or something like that. Like if you make this not a square, like not a square, then it won't rotate perfectly. So you won't be able to use the random rotation. You would have to customize it so that it's only 180 degrees if you're trying to set that up. And then it would have to be the same width for every single tile as well if you wanted to do that. And then we have to realize the instances in order for us to be able to export this to convert it to a mesh. If you don't realize the instances, you can't convert this to a mesh. So when you're finally done setting this up however you want, if you right click, there's an option to convert it to a mesh, and then you can export the mesh. You can't export geometry nodes. There's no option to export geometry nodes. So if you don't realize the instances, you can't actually convert this to a mesh. So that's the entire setup. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a grid with random instances. And now we're actually going to be making some tiles that actually look pretty cool. All right, so now we're actually going to make some tiles for this. So let's delete the one that we had already and just make sure you have the floor tiles collection selected. Remember, it's randoming between the tiles that are in this collection. You can press Shift A on your keyboard and add a cube to your scene. And then you can press Tab to go into edit mode and just press S and Z to scale this on the Z axis. You can make this relatively thin. It doesn't need to be too thin, but yeah, make it thin or whatever. And then let's press Tab and go back to object mode. And we're going to add a bevel modifier. So if you don't, it's just this little wrenchy icon on the right here. And then you can click add modifier and add a bevel. And this looks okay. So what we're going to do now is we will add, so press Control 2 to add a subdivision surface. And this will make this have a little bit more detail. And then you could even turn this up to 3 if you want. Let's just leave it at 2. We're going to press Control A on the bevel to apply it, and then Control A on the subdivision surface to apply it. And now if you press Tab on your keyboard, you should see you have something that looks like this. So these are a little bit too perfect, and these are way too spaced apart. So if you select the grid on the right here, we can just turn down both of these values. If you drag downwards, you can drag both of them at the same time. So they should be the same number, and you want them just touching each other, maybe just like that. And actually, you don't want a gap in between them. So just like maybe like that for right now. And then we're going to click back on this. And we just want to go into this and press Control A. And actually, this is a good time to duplicate this. So you could press Shift D on your keyboard in object mode, not edit mode. And just press Y and just bring it down here. Select both of these and Shift D and X and Shift D and X again. And we probably only need maybe like 8 tiles. That's probably fine for what we're going to do. And then you can select all of them and press Tab to go into edit mode. And then you can press right click and randomize the vertices. And this looks like over here on the right. So let's change the amount to 0.02 for right now so that they're just slightly randomized. And that looks good. So right there, we were in material mode, which is this one. And when you change to this mode, you can see that they actually have like a different look when you do this. And I kind of like that look. If you want them to be smoother, you could just right click and shade smooth by angle. That will get rid of that and just kind of make them more like rough like this. Let's leave it like that for right now. But if you do like the square cutout look to it, you could leave it, you could right click and shade flat, and that will give you that look. So it depends on what you're going for. And then now we just need to like make some of these deformed. So let's just select the top right one here and press Tab to go into edit mode. Turn on proportional editing, and you can maybe change it to sphere so it's like more rounded when you move this. Then select this and press 7 on your keyboard so you're at a top view. So it's only moving it on X and Y. You don't want it to be moving like, if you press G from any other angle, you can see that you have the ability to move it up and down. We don't want that. We only want it to go on the X and the Y axis. And you could just press G and scale this up a little bit. And this is kind of like pushing it inwards like that. We don't want that. Let's just change this to smooth. And let's try it like that. Okay, so we're just going to go through some of these and do that really quickly. So you could just select a vertice and just press G and just kind of move them away from the edge a little bit like this so that they're not perfect. And we really don't want any of them to be 100% perfect. So maybe this one could be like more squished together like that. Let's just see, which one is that? Yeah. Like that, so that it's more like rounded. And then we could select this one maybe and just move this down a little bit. And then this one could be more squished, like horizontally like this. And remember, the rotation is random, so this one would technically kind of be the same as this one. So yeah, and then this one could be like maybe a little bit more out, like upwards, like that. That's looking pretty cool. So any of these that you see that don't look because you don't want them to be perfect, especially for our first level. It's kind of going to be like you're going into like the beginning of a cave or whatever, and then eventually you're gonna, as you go through the levels, you'll end up in a castle. There'll be like an abandoned castle, and then you'll find out that it's a real castle and stuff like that. There's going to be a lot to the storyline for this, so we're just starting in like a cave type area. It's kind of like there's going to be tiles in it, even though it's a cave. But anyway, yeah. So I think these are looking really good. So this is a great start, and then we just want to apply material to this. So let's select the material setting here, and we can select all of these, and we'll press Control L, and we can link the materials so that they're linked together. So select all of these, Control L, link the materials, and then if you go into here, we'll add a new material. We'll call this tile main, and then just make it a little bit darker maybe, and ooh, that's looking nice. So then again, you could just press Control L, link materials, and this will apply to all of them. So this is really cool. And then you could add some like cracks if you want to. I don't know if I'm gonna bother adding cracks. You could play with like the metallic settings if you want to make it more shiny. And turn down the roughness. This makes it like reflective if you want to, or you could turn up the roughness and make it like really yeah, you can mess with these settings and do whatever you want. Just remember that if you're putting this into Unity for like my project, you're going to be changing the material in Unity. Unity won't have the same look to it. So when you copy this to Unity, it's really a crapshoot. It might look similar to what it looks like in here, but it also might not look as good as it does in here. So you have to keep that kind of in mind. All right, so I'm not going to spend too long on the tile set. You could cut cracks into these. You could add plants to them. You could add vines along the sides. There's lots of stuff you can do with this. I'm not going to do that right now because the video is already going to be like 20 minutes, and videos longer than 20 minutes, they are doomed to fail on YouTube. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for creating the tiles. Now we need to export this into our game. So if we right click this, we can convert it to a mesh. And so now we have this mesh. We can press File, Export, FBX. And I'm just going to put this in my downloads folder, but I'm going to change the date to, let's just put 2 at the end here, because I think I've already imported this once. And just make sure you change it to selected objects so you don't export everything. You can change this to FBX unit scale and turn off the animations. You don't, obviously it's not animated. And you can export this, and then back in your Unity game, let me just close out of this, and I'll hide this floor that's here already, and I'm just going to drag the floor in here because I'm probably going to delete it after, depending on which one looks better. I think that the one that I made, obviously I spent more time on the one that I made for my game than, we'll just put this in the root of the animations folder, why not? Okay, so then from here, we can just drag it into the scene. And the origin of this is in the wrong spot, probably. So my origin for the one that I already put in is like in a different spot. Looks like this is dead in the center, so we could just reset it probably. So if you just click on this, you can hit reset and then rotate it 90 degrees on X and then lock the scale, and then you just scroll it up. So then we can press play. And yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much it. You might want to make these less. The gaps are a little bit too large, so that kind of really doesn't look great. And we also need to probably add a material. So dungeon floor material. And we could drag that material onto this floor. And then we could change this to match the walls better. So like a dark gray might be good, like this. And then less smooth, so it's like a little bit like more like mellow, and then just a little bit more metallic could be good as well. All right, guys, I'm going to be honest, this doesn't look as good as the one that I have in the demo. I think that the tiles that we just made, There's too much space in between the tiles. If you're looking at that, there's like all of these holes that are way too large. And for my other one, there's the holes are way smaller and most of them are fully square. I'm not going to fix it in this example, but one way you could fix it is you could just go into the modifier for this and you could just lower the floor size so that they're more crushed together. The other thing you could do is you could just delete all of the tiles you have and just kind of start over and just don't bevel them as much and don't make them as rounded and don't move the corners as much. I'm not going to do that in this video because it's going to take too long, and this is more of just like how to use this floor generator. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one.